Happy New Year, 2025. All right, so if you've watched my old videos, you might have seen that I used to travel a lot more than I do now. Basically, it's the same story that everybody has. I used to travel more. I used to go to various parts of Asia, Europe, at least once a year, typically a few times a year. And even if it was only for a day, literally one day, I would land in the morning, walk anywhere I could, get as many photos as I could, and then fly out that night. The way I did it was, I've never had a lot of money. I've never had money to just throw at vacations or throw at photo trips or the newest gear. So I was always thinking, well, if I'm going to save my money, I'm going to spend my money on a camera, always a secondhand camera. I very rarely buy new cameras, though later on at some point in my life I did. Most of the time I bought secondhand cameras, secondhand lens. I would keep my kit as light as possible. I didn't have all this additional accessories and stuff. I would use either no bag or whatever just backpack I happen to have with me. And I wouldn't pay for a cab. I wouldn't do anything. I'd actually hop online. I'd search for the cheapest trip possible. And I would say, okay, where is it to and how long is it for? And most of the time, again, it was a day trip somewhere in Asia. I'd hop over to Singapore, hop over to Hong Kong, be there for a day and come back because it was very cheap. It didn't take very long. And if I had to stay overnight somewhere, typically I would just sleep at the airport. I would leave the airport, and then at night when I couldn't stay awake any longer, I needed some sleep, I'd go back to the airport and I'd go sit in one of the chairs because, the airport's open 24/7, and I'd snuggle down into a chair and I'd pass out for a while. When I woke up later, I'd pick up some coffee in the airport, and then I'd walk out the front doors and go explore some more. So I've always had an approach of, I don't have a lot of money to just throw at the problem. I'm not going to be able to afford this big, luxurious vacation, but I can still very slowly chip away at the travel bug and see different parts of the world and get some interesting photos from a variety of places. And as I got older, as I'd been married longer, as my kids got older, very slowly it was getting easier to pay off bills, save some money, stay a little bit longer, fly a little bit further, that kind of thing. And then 2020 happened and everybody stopped flying, and that just set me back mentally. I wasn't worried about it. It's just that for a while there, the flights were canceled. Like, you couldn't go anywhere. And then when you could, there were so many restrictions and there were so many hoops you had to jump through, and there's so much stuff going on that it was like, yeah, I'll wait for things to, kind of die down and get back to normal. But complacency kills, as you sit at home and you get comfortable. And I mentally got used to just having my routine around Taiwan and not going anywhere. It got easier and easier to kind of forget that I like to travel and make that happen. So this year, after me and the wife talking about it for a while, we decided we did want to go to Japan. It was an entire family trip, actually. It was me, my wife, my two boys, my in-laws, like all of my in-laws, like my wife's parents, her aunts and uncles and cousins. There was probably 16 of us total. We all flew to Hokkaido, and I had never been there before. So basically, in this video, I'm probably going to do a few videos on Hokkaido from different aspects, not just where that was at, but you'll get what I'm saying when you see what I'm talking about here. So I have 3 cameras here. I had paralysis by analysis. I could not decide which camera I wanted to take on this trip. I have, just as over the years, I've owned so many cameras and lenses, and I've sold so many, bought, sold, traded, whatever. Usually a camera has to be special or particularly useful. I really have to like the camera to hang on to it. And that was just through lessons learned the hard way. What I mean by that is that I had I originally owned all the Fujifilm stuff. I'm not going to go into all that, but basically everything that was first generation Fujifilm mirrorless, the X-E1, the X Pro 1, the original X100, the XT1, all of the original Fujifilm stuff I had owned at some point. Didn't love all of it, but I really, really loved my original X100, and I really, really loved the X Pro 1. And at that time thinking like, hey, Fujifilm's not popular. It's so easy to find these secondhand and they're so cheap. I'll just sell it now, get something else. And later, if I decide I want it again, I'll just buy another X Pro 1. It'll be easy and cheap. And obviously that's not what happened. Fujifilm became very popular. And these days they have this artificial scarcity where they intentionally kind of limit how much they put out into the market. So everyone clamors to buy them and the prices go sky high. And if you want one, you're going to have to pay more for it from a reseller than you would from a shop that doesn't have the thing. And finding the old Fuji stuff is getting increasingly difficult and the prices have gotten ridiculous. So looking back, I think, man, I really wish I would not have sold my original X100. I should have just held on to that. Lesson learned. But the same thing happened with my original Pentax K5. I never had the K3, never had a K1, but I had the, or the K7, never had a K7, but I had the original K5, not the K5 II or the K5 IIS. I had the K5. And I love that camera. That's still probably one of my favorite cameras. It was the first time that I was aware of why Pentax has such a loyal and hardcore following. Obviously the lens selection is great and they're all good lenses, even though some of them are kind of oddball. But the camera itself is just so reliable and so tough and so well built. And it had so many intuitive little features, like the manual focus assist just was so flawless and perfect, and great camera. Wish I never would have sold it. Again, lesson learned, because now I can easily find a used K3. I can easily find a K1. I can find a K5 IIS. But finding a straight up just original K5, at least in this part of the world, is exceedingly difficult. And when you do find one, they are outrageously priced and they've got some wear on them. So lesson learned. Same with my Olympus EM5 Mark II, one of my favorite cameras. Never should have sold it. Now I'm kicking myself for it. So as I kept learning these very difficult lessons the hard way over and over again, I started to hang on to cameras for longer than I typically would, just to see if I really wanted to get rid of it. And if I had a camera for a very, very long time, like over a year, and I never used it and I didn't even think about using it and I was not motivated and I couldn't talk myself into it, then I typically figured it's pretty safe to get rid of that thing. But, and the example of my old Canon 5D Classic, this is a camera that this year will be 20 years old. And I'm actually going to do a 2025 review for this camera, a 20th anniversary. And that's, again, a whole different video. But aside from the fact that this is popular all over the world, it is a legendary camera. Aside from all that, there are plenty of cameras that are very popular and very legendary that I've never owned, I don't want to own, I don't care. Or I own them myself and I couldn't understand what all the fuss was about and I got rid of it and I never regretted getting rid of it. But the 5D, I can say, is one of those cameras that I too love. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's great. It's obviously an acquired taste. Certain people won't get it. They'll think it's overrated. They will never try it, and that's fine. Or they will try it, they'll hate it, fine. Now, I'm not one of these guys that's going to own 5 of the things. I only need 1, but it was the first camera I ever bought again. I had owned a 5D Classic. I had eventually gotten rid of it, thinking I'd be okay. Very quickly realized I wasn't okay, and I wanted to own another. So the next time I came across one that was in good condition for a good price, I snatched it up, and now I refuse to sell it. This is staying here in the office or in my camera bag, and I find myself still using it all the time and loving it. Now that's with the option of a D700. This is the Nikon D700. Again, legendary camera, huge cult following. Some people say it's the greatest camera of all time. I never owned one until this past year, probably around a year ago that I bought this. I have to check the date, but it was a camera that I always wanted, actually. I always knew it was legendary, but for also sentimental reasons, because of where it's at in history, because of some photographers that I'm a fan of that used the camera, and because of some kind of some stories you'd hear behind the scenes about this camera or who used it or how they used it and where. There was just so much going that I would never let go of this idea that I want to try the D700, and I hope I love it. And I finally got one. I did an unboxing video and I've been using it since, and I absolutely love it. It is about as different as you could possibly imagine from the 5D Classic. I don't think they share anything in common other than the megapixels. They're both 12 megapixel full frame cameras, but other than that, I think they're about as different as it gets. And even the experience of shooting them or what you use them for is, and the rendering is very, very different. However, for all of its own reasons, I love the D700 and I refuse to get rid of it. I don't think I need a second or a third, but I'm always going to have at least one. And then there's my just trusty, reliable Canon 6D. This was not an old nostalgic choice. Was actually because I remember when this camera was new. I remember using cameras and buying cameras and being into photography when this camera was released, and watching the review videos from Digital Rev, Kai and Locke, comparing this thing against the 5D Mark II or the 5D Mark III. And I remember thinking to myself, despite the conclusion that other people were coming to at the time when it was new, people would complain that it was a little small or it didn't have all the same physical controls. And there's still a great reason to buy a 5D2 or 5D3. But to me, I thought, I don't care that it only has 1/4000th shutter. I don't care that it's got the top screen has a plastic, it's a plastic screen rather than glass or whatever it is. Like, there's all these tiny, very negligible little differences about a 6D versus a 5D3, for example, that to me weren't a big deal. And since most of my cameras I've ever owned were single card slot, that wasn't a big deal. It just always seemed, especially as the years went on and I saw more test images and I was reading test charts of dynamic range and low light performance, I was seeing video samples and all this different stuff. It just seemed to me like the 6D was punching way above its pay grade. And I just couldn't understand. I take that back. That's going to sound ridiculous. If you are a working professional and you need this as a reliable tool for your job, obviously I can understand why you would want, in many cases, a 5D3 instead of the 6D. However, for a lot of professional photographers, the 6D would still be the better choice, depending on what it is they do professionally. Like, for example, if somebody does really, really challenging lighting situations, like a high ISO, low light stuff, the 6D outperforms the 5D3. And if you do astrophotography, it seems like the 6D was a favorite for astrophotographers. So considering it was their cheapest full frame ever, and its kit lens was an L lens, and you could buy these things compared to other cameras pretty cheap brand new, and then even cheaper on the secondhand market, it just always seemed like a no-brainer. Like, this is probably the cheapest way, and this was years ago, obviously, but at that time, it was like, this is the cheapest way. Like, buying a secondhand 6D is the cheapest, easiest, fastest way to get a modern full-frame camera that actually has really solid specs, really good image output, and insane low light performance. And it, of course, EF mount, so it has all access to all the EF lenses. Like, of course I want this camera. But again, just through life and circumstances, no, I'll get that later. Because again, there's so many available. It's like, there's no rush. I'll get that at some point. I'm not going to rush. And in years and years, I never had one. And then by the time I actually was very seriously about to buy this one right here, because it was such a great price, I said this in my 6D video, I had this initial hesitation, like, oh, wait a minute. Suddenly I was second guessing myself and I thought, what if it's not that great? And I was really like, the wheels were turning, and I thought, what if the primary benefits of this camera only applied to it being new? Like, it was such good value for a dollar back in 2012. What if now it's actually not such a great value? What if, even though the low light performance used to be insane, by today's standards, it's actually not so good? What if I don't like it? And I ended up saying, I'll regret it more if I never try. And this idea of it being too old potentially is only going to get worse the more years go on. So I'll go ahead and buy it. And then I didn't use it for a while. I was actually so worried that I was going to hate it that I kept passing over it and not using it. I would grab the 5D Classic instead because I knew I loved that. I'd grab something else. And I was like, oh, I'll grab the 6D later. That's later. I'll do something special with that. And I finally realized that on a subconscious level, I was kind of scared to use it because I didn't want to hate it. And I finally just kicked myself in the butt, made myself use it, and I loved it. Like, it's like genuinely, I actually just, how do I say it? I'm trying to think of a good way to distinguish these. When I think of the 5D Classic, I think of obviously legendary status because of where it was in the market and what it represented and what it did. But really, to me, the reason why I keep going back to it is because it's enjoyable to use. And I'm trying to think of a better way to describe it because they're all enjoyable to use. I'm trying to think of a way to put my actual thoughts and feelings into words, so bear with me here. On an intuitive, tactile level, it's not something I actually think of. It's an intuition type of thing. This feels like a film camera to me on an intuitive level. It's stripped down and it's basic and it's very clearly old, but in a kind of romantic way that I appreciate. It's not old like this, like something that's outdated, like, I gotta get rid of this thing, it sucks, like using a phone that's too old. This is old in like a classic film camera sort of way, where every time you use it, it is evident that it's old, but that's part of what you like about it, is it's that kind of retro, old school, nostalgic feel. And to me anyway, for my mindset and how I use it, like there are no compromises. Like if you've got a fast lens, I can shoot at night and never really have to go above ISO 800. Most of the time I can keep it at ISO 400. If I'm shooting wide open on the 35-1.4, I can usually keep the ISO at 400. It's only when I want to stop down a little bit to make sure that I get some more things in focus that I'll then go up to 800 or play it safe and go up to 1600. And despite what people say, I love the way 1600 ISO looks out of this camera. To me, again, if you're exposed properly and you're not trying to push 5 stops in post-production, 1600 actually looks really clean and very organic and very nice. So this is just like it's like a film camera. It's like digital film, which I've said in the reviews to it before. And I mean that in the most loving and appreciative way possible. I love my digital film camera. Now, the D700 is a different space. This, to me, on the intuitive level, it's not something I think of. It's just the way I kind of approach the camera subconsciously. The D700 to me just feels like a workhorse. Like wow. Again, it doesn't do video, so it's a little bit limited in the sense of like, okay, it doesn't do video. It doesn't have dual card slots. So on a subconscious level, I know that there are some compromises. But again, from a pure photography standpoint, it's like, it just does so many things so well. The autofocus system is awesome. Like it's really kind of foolproof. I don't think I've ever missed focus with this camera. The way it feels, like it feels like, I'll tell you this, I've said before, the 5D Classic is built very well. When I first got my very first 5D, I was actually shocked at how good the build quality was, because something about the photos of it online or the way it looks in videos, it just kind of looks kind of lightweight, kind of hollow, kind of plasticky. But then you get it and it's like, wow, this thing is like a dense brick. It's really well built. Until you hold the D700. Then you understand why so many reviewers who have compared the two will say that this build quality doesn't approach the D700. It's not because they're saying anything negative about the 5D. The 5D is built great. I'm not scared to drop the thing. Literally, it's a tough camera, but the D700 is just a different level. This is golden era Nikon. This is literally about as golden era Nikon as you can get, and you can tell when you use the camera. Same feeling I had when I used my Nikon D3S, which was again one of my favorite cameras of all time. I wish I never would have sold. Aside from the fact that, like, aesthetically, I've always loved this round viewfinder window on these pro Nikon bodies. I don't know what it is, but to me, there's something about that I've always loved on all of them, whether it's the D3S that I had, or the D800, or this D700. This round viewfinder window to me it immediately elevates the camera so much. But even when I compare this to my old D800 that I had the D800, and it was a good camera, but I didn't ever really love it. I didn't complain about it like some people do. I didn't have the same problems that some people complain about, like with focus or whatever else, but I just didn't love the camera. And I thought it was a little bit overrated. It was mainly just the megapixels you were buying. But even aesthetically, to look at that camera next to this has that more classic car. It's like the D800 were kind of melted, kind of pushed down. This viewfinder bump up here is more squished down on the D800, and the side's a little more rounded. It's like they were trying to look more modern, but to me, it just kind of looks bland. Whereas this has unapologetic curves, unapologetic bumps and swooshes, and it ages so well. And it feels good in the hand. It has a ridge on the back, the ridge on the front. It feels great in the hand. It's, again, built like a tank. It has the great individual dedicated buttons up here, which aesthetically I think look good, and also in practice it makes it so fast and easy. Like the button layout on this camera, I wouldn't say it's the best of any camera ever, but it's probably fighting for second or third place. It is so fast and easy and intuitive to change any setting on this camera fast. So this to me feels like this isn't a compared to the 5D or anything else, just on its own, on an intuitive, instinctive level, it's like, oh, this is a professional camera. This thing was meant for getting work done. So many dials, so many buttons, everything so well thought out and figured out as far as how the placement was going to be set up, like the where each button is. Why would we put the AF button here instead of the auto exposure? Why it's that way instead of flip? Like, everything was so well thought out, so well engineered. Then, of course, all that classic Nikon goodness on top of the fact that, again, golden age of Nikon, this was actually made in Japan. Despite the fact that it wasn't a D3, it was the lower down D700, it was still made in Japan. And then past that is the fact that the sensor inside is actually made by Nikon. It's a Nikon sensor, not a Sony sensor. So this represents everything good about Nikon, everything they had to offer during their golden era, in my opinion. And that's what you feel, and that's what you experience when you shoot it. And of course, the colors, although very different than the 5D, it's such beautiful image output, and the white balance is foolproof, and it does really, really well. Even when I'm shooting in cities with all these different colored neon lights and different light sources, the images out of camera just look correct. Like the camera was able to balance all of these different light sources so well. So this is the workhorse, professional, what you need to get the work done sort of camera. And then in my mind, again, on actually more of a conscious level, I do think this actively, but it's also a little bit subconscious. The 6D is the play it safe camera. It's smaller, and that's not good. I like big cameras as far as how they feel in the hand. I prefer the larger bodies of the D700 or the 5D. The 6D, although it's not bad, I don't like that it's a little bit smaller. It doesn't feel as good in my hand. I have big hands. But it's not so small that it feels cramped. I don't feel bothered by using it. Like when I had the M6 Mark II, that was too small. I felt cramped using that camera, and it was uncomfortable, and I found myself not wanting to use it. Actually, I was using my 5D Classic instead of my M6 II usually, because this was just more comfortable. This is that kind of middle zone where it doesn't feel great in the hand. It's not perfect ergonomics or button layout, but it's also not bad. It's safe. It will safely to suit the most people. Big hands or small hands, everyone can use this. It's the safe choice. It's the same with a button layout. It has enough buttons that you can safely get to all your functions, but not so many that it's overly complicated and, or it's encroaching on the 5D series. So it's a safe button layout. It's fantastic battery life. Like, the battery life on this thing is insane. To this day, even by modern standards, even by DSLR standards, it's way better than the battery life on the D700, for example. And the batteries charge quickly. The low light is foolproof. Like, I'll put this thing in auto ISO, and I don't even think about what the ISO is at. I'll just let it do whatever. I'll stop down so I can get more depth of field in low light, and it ends up shooting at 12,800. And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's already holds up very well at high ISOs. And then worst case scenario, I always have denoise AI in Lightroom I could always use. So there's that. And then there's the fact that I know it's full frame. So if I put a 35 millimeter lens on it, I'm actually getting 35 millimeters. When I put my 16 to 28, I can get a real deal 16 millimeter wide end. If I put an f2.8 lens, I'm getting the depth of field of an f2.8 lens or an f1.4 or whatever else. Also, it does video. So if I'm specifically, I have my action cam like I'm shooting with right now. Action cams are so convenient, and they have so many benefits for video that I use them most of the time. Even for stuff that needs more manual exposure. Like, I did a recent video, it was me and my sons dancing in the hot spring hotel in Japan, and I actually used my action cam. It's the Leica, not Leica, sorry, I see the Leica lens looking at me, so that's what I said. It's the Insta360 Ace Pro, and I just set it to manual exposure, set it to 100 ISO, 30 frames per second, 1/60th shutter speed, so it was a 180 degree shutter. You can even manually select white balance, whatever you want to get the look you want. But there are some times when I want full frame video. I want specifically to get either full frame video because of the better quality, or because I want that shallower depth of field. I want video with a bokeh, or because I want to physically, like, manually pull focus, or I want a wider selection of lenses for the video. So I can have my full frame video and get the 16 millimeters, the wide end, or I can put a telephoto on there. And this gives me predictable, reliable, easy, great full frame video. So this is just, it's not that it's, oh, I love this camera, it's nostalgic. It's not that, like these kind of are. It's not even that it's the best at being professional. It's just that it does a lot of things, and it does all of them pretty well. Like, it balances so many party tricks. It's not the best at any of them, but it does so many things so predictably well without thinking about it that it's like, this is just kind of a foolproof camera. When you need something that's your safety bet that you don't have to worry about, like, it'll be fine, you get one of these. Even from a safety standpoint of, like, what if I drop the camera and it breaks? What if it gets stolen? Well, that's okay. Because whereas D700s are getting harder to find in good condition, 5D Classics are getting harder to find in good condition, 60s are not only still plentiful and they're very easy to find, but their prices are actually still continuing to go down. They don't have the same legendary status that these other cameras have. So every time I think that a 6D can't possibly get cheaper, and surely the price is going to start going up, no, it steadily keeps declining. I could pick up a pretty good condition 6D right now locally here in the city I live in Taichung, for, like, I think with a current currency conversion, it's like 150, 160 bucks. It's in good condition. It comes with all the accessories, the original box, everything. And that's not uncommon here locally. So I keep this because it's kind of a jack of all trades safety bet. And when it came to this trip to Hokkaido, I was like, what do I want to take? Do I want to take my safety camera? Do I want to take my workhorse camera? Do I want to take the nostalgic love camera? And I could argue a case for all of them. And at the end, I decided Because it's funny, actually, I initially thought there's no way I'm going to take all three. That would be ridiculous. Obviously, I can't do that. And then in the end, that actually was the best choice. I just took all three cameras. I travel light anyway. I always carry a few pairs of clothes, like 2 complete outfits that can be mixed and matched, and I can wash them in the laundry facilities wherever I'm traveling if I need to. And then, 2 sets of clothing, 2 outfits, doesn't take up a lot of space. With larger items like the jackets or hoodies, like I'm wearing those when I show up to the country, so it's on my back. So the rest of the space in the one bag that I'm taking can be taken up by camera gear. And I ended up going all over the island of Hokkaido with, usually the way I set it up was this 6D with the 16 to 28. This was in my camera bag, which is like a sling, like a messenger style camera bag made by Ulanzi. It's water resistant, all that stuff. That was in the bag just in case I needed it, in case I needed that wide angle. I couldn't get it with 35, for example. But what stayed on my shoulder all the time, the bag, was on my back. So I had the strap for my messenger bag across my chest with the bag on my back, and I could sling it around and pull the 60 out if I had to. But most of the time it was on my back and I didn't think about it. And then across my body, but sitting on the front, down by my waist kind of ab area, was my D700 with the 85 millimeter prime, 85 f1.8. So if I needed a longer focal length, a little more compression, I needed a little more reach, I could quickly grab the D700. And what I kept just over my shoulder, which I was using most often in lifting for my everyday visual stuff, was the Canon 5D Classic with the 35 f1.4, the Sigma 35 f1.4 Art. And that actually worked out great. Not only was it, I didn't feel weighed down, as ridiculous as that sounds, it's actually not that heavy. I mean, it's a total of 3 lenses, which a lot of people will carry 3 or 4 or more lenses in their backpack on their back for their one camera. This was 3 lenses total. And then the bodies themselves, when you're comparing them for test charts, one seems heavy, one seems light, but really when it's attached to a strap that's hanging off your body, like, you don't notice, you adjust really quickly. So I've got 3 cameras, 3 lenses, and I didn't really notice it. To me, it was easy. I didn't feel weighed down. I wasn't ballooned out, taking up a bunch of space. I didn't have hip pouches and this and that. It was just a messenger bag, a small messenger bag on my lower back that I kept forgetting about. The D700 on the front, kind of right hip is where it would slide down to. And then a little bit higher was the 5D Classic that I actually kept pulled behind my arm a little bit near my tricep. So if I saw something where I needed the D700, either I wanted those colors or I wanted the portrait lens, I would let go of the strap for my 5D Classic, reach down, grab the D700, lift it, take the shot. And then if I, of course, saw something with the 35 that I wanted, which was most of the time, I just ride my hand. I'd slide this inside part of my thumb down the strap like that. I'd ride the thing down and it'd land on the grip of the camera. Ride it down and it lands on the grip of the camera, lift it up from below my arm and take the shot, and then slide it back down. And that, to me, ended up actually being, as ridiculous as it sounded initially, ended up being the fastest, easiest travel solution I've ever had. Like, I've taken so many camera systems around the world to different countries. APS-C cameras, full frame cameras, micro four thirds cameras. I've taken prime lenses, like a bunch of prime lenses. I've tried a single zoom lens. I've tried so many different solutions. And if you take a single zoom lens, inevitably what happens is you run into situations where you just couldn't open up the aperture enough. Even a fast professional zoom lens, you're looking at an f2.8 constant and you needed something faster. So you found yourself making do with what you had, but it's like, I really wish I had a prime. I really needed f1.4 for the effect I wanted to get, or to capture this the way I wanted to. So you lose out on the shot you wanted. Or you have your collection of fast primes, but suddenly that means you have to change them out. You'll see a situation like, and you have to, like, in your head know, is it worth grabbing my bag and trying to quickly change out the lenses and capture it? Or in doing that, am I going to miss that? I'm going to miss this thing anyway. I wasted my time. And now I don't have the lens that I need for my general purpose. So I missed something else, right? It's like a double whammy. So having those primes can be useful for like walking around and travel photography, but it can also bite you because you have to change them out. Same with using a smaller sensor versus a larger sensor. Like there's always a compromise somewhere. As ridiculous as it sounded, mix and matching Nikon and Canon, primes and zooms, and having 3 different cameras with 3 different lenses and 3 completely different batteries and 3 completely different chargers, as cumbersome and ridiculous as that sounds, in real world practice, it turned out to actually be a really good idea. I was able to always have the fast 35 available when I needed it, could always capture it. When I saw something where I knew I needed more reach, I didn't even have to put the 5D Classic down. It was already over my shoulder. I would just let go of the strap and grab the D700, which was already on. And I would immediately, with like in less than 1 second, I had a D700 with an 85 and I could capture that, and vice versa. Even if I was holding the D700, I could just let go and it would fall down and it was hanging off my body, so it's not going to hit the ground. I could literally let go of the D700 and grab the 5D and lift it. Now I have a 35 prime. So there was all that. And there was one point where I was in downtown Sapporo, and I was at this one intersection where there's just huge billboards and lights on every single corner, and there's a tram coming through, and there's people on the street, and there's cabs, and like there's so much stuff going on that from this one scene, I wanted to be able to capture this side of the road if you crossed this way, plus this side of the road if you crossed this way, plus the opposite corner, and I wanted to see the people waiting for the lights that were standing on the corner in front of me. And the only way I could do that is this if I had brought my 16 to 28. So all I had to do was let go of the camera strap, and both my 5D Classic and the D700 were both hanging off my body, and just reach around, grab the messenger bag, slide it around to the front, pull the top open, grab the 6D, which again was turned on but was asleep. I'd grab the 6D back to 16 millimeters, raise it to my eye, and then I'd kind of adjust my stance where I needed to get the shot centered, and I was able to take the shot. So, and then as soon as I was done, I thought, okay, no more. Put it back in the bag, throw it back around my back, and I'm back to my original setup. So I learned a lot on this trip, actually. I learned a lot about what seems like a good idea, what seems like it will work out the best versus what actually is a good idea, what actually does work out to be the best. I also learned, believe it or not, some new things about my 5D Classic. Now, I will mention these again in the dedicated 5D video, because there's a lot of people who probably are skipping through this video or not watching to the end, so they're not going to see this. But one of the reasons why I don't use my 5D Classic even more than I already do is just because of the battery situation. I have said it before that my number one complaint with these old 5Ds is that some of them, not all, some people don't have the problem, but about half the people who own these do have the problem, where they mention that even when the camera is turned off, the battery slowly drains and nobody can figure it out. I mean, I've heard so many theories of what it could be, maybe this, maybe that. Years and years and years, I've gone back and I've checked so many times. I've talked to so many people. I've checked Canon logs, like actual like sales brochures, and times when people have consulted Canon technicians and seen their responses, and nobody really can give you a straight answer on why it does that or how to fix it. I even heard some people have these DIY solutions, like, well, you know what it actually is it's because of the internal battery, some people call the CMOS battery. It's like a watch battery that goes right here. And they say if you actually replace that, then it won't do that anymore. So I replaced that battery myself. Still does it. When it's off, it will drain the battery. Like in a single day. If I put a fresh, brand new, topped off battery in it in the morning, and I'm really conservative, and I do what I do with all my other cameras, and I shoot, and then I turn it off and I wait until I see something later. I'll turn it back on and shoot again. Or even if I just get home from a day of shooting and I turn it off and set it on the desk, like I do with so many of my other cameras. If it is off, it drains the battery, and shockingly fast. By the end of the day or by the next morning, when I go to pick up this camera and I turn it back on, it'll be like low battery. It'll show like one little bar. And then sometimes, if it's the next morning instead of that night, it'll show like one bar, like, uh-oh. And it's so low that as I'm looking at it, trying to see if I can at least quickly do something, the battery will just go dead and I got to put a new one in it. So that has always made me hesitate. Like, I really love the 5D Classic, but I can't trust it to reliably be literally like ready for me. It could go dead at any point because of this mysterious battery issue. So anytime I take it out, I always put a fresh battery in it, and I have an extra one with me, and I pay attention. And there's been so many times when still, even with that, I'll be out in the middle of the day shooting, and suddenly the battery goes dead. I'm like, oh, fuck, 5D Classic, son of a bitch. And then I was worried about that with this trip, and actually it was funny because nobody has ever said this before. Not a single person, all these years, over 20 years the camera's been out, nobody's ever said this about the 5D Classic. But it turns out, for whatever reason, this thing drains the battery so fast when it's off. It turns out that whatever that internal issue is, it doesn't exist if you keep it on and let it go to sleep. Sorry. Special effects. Bombshell. Like, I know it seems like what I said just now is very simple and not a big deal. Maybe I'm overreacting, but this is such a big deal. It's not a little bit of a difference. I'm not saying that it slightly improves the situation. I'm not saying that you can safely get through one day of shooting. What I'm telling you is that for countless years now, I have had battery anxiety with my 5D Classic. Any of them, it's happened with both of the 5D Classics I've owned, same issue. Because I never know when the thing is just suddenly going to go dead because it drains the battery so fast, even when it's off. The only way I can avoid draining the battery is to take the battery completely out when I'm not using the camera. And even then, just to be safe, because I turned it off during the day when I was using it, I have to always make sure it's topped off just in case. For years now, it's been this way. For years. And it's affected so many people. Nobody knows the trick. Nobody knows the solution. I didn't know the solution. And then on this trip, I had this free idea of like, I don't even care. I'm just going to keep it on. Even if I keep it on, it can't possibly be worse than turning it off. It cannot possibly, like it actually seems impossible that this could possibly, in any reality, drain the battery faster by keeping it on than it does when I turn the thing off. It's no difference. So I might as well just keep it on. So at least I can, it's on when I need it. If the battery's dead, it's dead. I'll have to change the battery anyway. But at least when I see a shot, if I still have battery, I don't have to remember to turn it on. And I'm definitely not going to take the battery out because it would take too long to see a shot, grab the battery, put it in the camera, turn it on, all this stuff. So I had this like, no, you know what? I'm not worried about it. I've got the 6D. If the 5D just doesn't work out, if the battery thing is too much of a hassle and it's unreliable, especially in this super cold weather, it was well below zero, way below freezing. If it just doesn't work out, then I'll put it back in the bag and I'll put my 35 on the 6D, and that's what I'll carry around. It's my safety backup. And I'll still have my D700, which I can get plenty of use out of, so I'm not worried about it. Just going to keep the 5D Classic on, and I'll let it go to sleep. Turns out that's the life hack with the 5D Classic. I didn't change the battery at all the entire time I was in Hokkaido. I didn't change the battery at all the entire time I was in Hokkaido. I was there for 5 days. For 5 days. I was waking up at 6 a.m. typically, going to bed later than usual because, I'm on vacation. So I'm like staying up until 11 or 12. and I had the camera over my shoulder all day. I was taking pictures in the morning, evening, night, inside, outside, base ISO, 1600 ISO. I took so many photos, the 5D Classic, like more than I've ever taken in that period of time. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I took 3 different cameras, and just the 5D Classic by itself, I probably took close to 1,000 photos. Just, safety shots, whatever else. Close to 1,000 photos over the course of 5 days in sub-zero weather, literally sub-zero. It was an Arctic area. I mean, if you go to Hokkaido's northmost point, the tip, I forget what it's called, but there's a name for that part of the island. It is 43 kilometers away. Travel over the ocean 43 kilometers and you hit the southern tip of eastern Russia. Like Arctic eastern Russia. It's cold in Hokkaido. And despite the fact that I didn't have anything covering this up, I didn't keep it safe in a bag, I didn't keep it under my jacket, it was out in the Arctic weather all day, every day, getting snowed on with no weather sealing or anything else. And I had it on, I just let it go to sleep and I wasn't using it. That one battery, granted it's a new battery, it's not old, it's a brand new battery, but that one battery lasted all 5 days. I never had to replace the battery. The other 2 backups that I took stayed in the bag the whole time, never had to use them. This is a game changer for what I can do with the 5D moving forward. Now, of course, in my upcoming 5D review for 2025, I'm sorry, I'm also going to talk about how you can manually fix the focus. People talk about after a while the focus is off and there's no internal way to micro adjust the focus. I show you how to do that with a little wrench without breaking the camera. Like, it's an actual predictable, reliable way to do that. I talk about, again, this turns out if it's draining the battery when it's off, don't worry about that anymore. There's little tips and tricks I picked up over the years with this camera. But my main takeaway was just that I'm going to make several videos. I'm going to make my upcoming D700 review, like full-on review that people have actually been asking me about a lot lately. I've been receiving comments on videos and messages on Instagram and emails, people asking, is a D700 review coming? Yes, it is, probably within the next month. I will be doing a dedicated video for the 5D Classic, the 2025 review, the 20-year anniversary. And then I might do some photo videos, just the photos that I took while I was in Hokkaido, across all the cameras, basically. And might show some video footage with my action cam that I took while I was there. Who knows with that? That's a little more iffy. We'll see. But anyway, other than that, this was a fantastic trip. We all loved it. Even before we came back to Taiwan, we were saying that we're definitely going to go back. I would highly recommend it to anybody. We always love going to Japan. All of us have been independently by ourselves, and we all love it. And I have many friends that are based in Japan. I've got friends. My buddy Noe, he lives in Seoul, South Korea, but I think he said that Tokyo is like his favorite place in the world. There are photographers I speak with on Instagram that I follow. They are based in Tokyo. One of my wife's old students, who she's remained very close with over the years, a girl named Zoe, fantastic photographer, by the way. She has lived in Tokyo for several years, and she has nothing but good things to say. She loves Tokyo, and she's Taiwanese, but I'm like, she loves Tokyo. And when she's currently in Taiwan visiting, we went out to lunch with her yesterday. That's one of the things we talked about, was just how great Tokyo is and how we need to go to Tokyo and spend time in Tokyo. So obviously everybody knows about Tokyo, but even outside, like, I've been to Okinawa multiple times. Love it. My wife loves it. My son loves it. We went to Hokkaido for the first time, and it was phenomenal. We went all over that island, all over the place. Every day was a new area. Nothing but good things to say. Loved it. I mean, it's hard to imagine anybody having a bad experience anywhere in Japan. It's such a great place to travel, especially if you're into photography. Like, it's very different. Like the photography opportunities that you have, like let's say in the north in Hokkaido versus in the south in Okinawa, are completely different. Like about as opposite as you can get. But they're still like equally beautiful and interesting and cool and exciting. And you get so many good photos. And of course, everyone knows what Tokyo has to offer. So I've been talking enough. It was a great trip. We loved it. We can't wait to go back. 5D Classic review coming up for 2025 with tips and tricks. The official Nikon D700 review for 2025 coming up. And probably just the travel video from our time in Japan. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Happy New Year. And I don't know, other than that, I guess I will talk to you later. Bye.